Joining us for a little bit is Louisiana's Commissioner of Administration, Jay Dardenne. Hey, Mr. Jay, welcome back to Keel. How you doing today?
Good morning, Robert, Aaron, Harry, L.
Let's start here, and let's start real basic because I need you to do a little explaining for me and everybody. Explain to everybody what the Revenue Estimating Committee is, who's on it, what does it do?
REC is a constitutional entity. There are 4 people on it: the governor or his representative, and I'm the representative, the president of the Senate, the speaker of the House, and an independent economist, who is Jim Richardson, who's been the independent economist on the board since its creation back in the late 80s, early 90s. The REC's job is to estimate revenue that the state will have to spend in every budget year. We never know exactly how much money you'll take in from taxes and what have you. You've got to estimate it, and we have a balanced budget requirement in Louisiana. You have to have the budget balanced at the beginning of the year and the end of the year, and that determination is made based upon what REC says will be the revenue for the year.
I would imagine in a state like Louisiana, which is such a big oil and gas and energy state, that given the fluctuating price of energy, specifically oil, that's nearly impossible to do that, right? How do you do that?
Well, that's not the major factor, to tell you the truth. Back in the 1980s, before the first bust, revenue from oil and gas, severance taxes, and royalties paid to the state was over 45% of the budget. It's now about 6% of the budget. So the dependency on oil and gas is not what it used to be, but the industry itself has a major impact on our economy because so many people are employed in this area. And when things don't go well with the price of oil and we stop producing, it certainly hurts the state. And that's what's happened in certainly last year, the end of last year, when the price fell so quickly. And that was right about the time REC was meeting. And we actually initially decided to lower our estimated price of oil even lower than what our economists were telling us their projections were. But they have very sophisticated models and data and years of experience in doing this, and so that's how they make their recommendations. But you're never going to get it right. There's been criticism of the REC because it seems to be never right. Well, it's never going to be exactly right. It is an estimate, and you hope at the end of the year you have a surplus and not a deficit, because that's the only 2 options you have. You're not going to hit it right on the button, and you're either going to have a little more revenue coming in than you thought, or a little less. And they factor in income taxes, corporate income taxes, sales taxes, severance taxes, and all the dedicated money that comes into the state all goes into their determination.
Mr. Jay, from a philosophical point of view, I don't base what I'm going to spend next year on what I think I'm going to make, and I don't many people who do. I spend based on what I do make. Wouldn't it make sense when you do this estimating committee, whatever the number happens to be, to target spending at maybe 10 or 15% below that, just to play it safe?
Well, the conference meets 4 times a year at a minimum to adjust the estimate as more data becomes available. And that's how you have to have mid-year cuts if you're not meeting those projections. There has been some discussion about budgeting not the entire amount of what is estimated, and that's something that needs to be considered. But, the state has so many needs, so many unmet needs, according to a lot of people right now, particularly when you look at spending in education and higher education in particular, that if you don't plan to spend everything that you have available, some say that's not a wise thing to do. And another argument would be, well, look, if you're not going to spend everything that you're supposed to be taking in, then don't charge me as much as you're charging me.
The Revenue Estimating Conference for this year shows that we're going to have a surplus. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
To what tune, Jay, at this point?
It's about over 120 million or about there, I think. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it's a pretty healthy number. The surplus from last fiscal year is about $308 million. So we've had a surplus last year. We'll have a surplus this year. That's a very good thing instead of having a deficit. We haven't had to make mid-year cuts.
Well, can you give me some of my money back then, Jay?
That's what the argument a lot of people would say. But, you've got to, this is an estimate. You don't know exactly what it's going to be. And when you have a surplus, the law tells you what to do with it. You have to put money in the rainy day fund. You have to make an additional payment down on the unfunded accrued liability on our retirement systems. And you have to spend that surplus only on non-recurring purposes, like one-time money. That's what got us into this problem, as we've talked about before. In the Jindal years, we were using one-time money to balance the budget. We're not doing that anymore. We don't have a nickel of one-time money in the budget. We have recurring revenue funding recurring expenses.
Mr. J, historically speaking, how close has the conference, how close have you guys been in getting it right? It occurs to me last year that number was, and maybe I'm getting my committees and conferences and estimates confused, but it seems at one point we were talking about $1 billion we needed, $600 million we needed, then we ended up with a $300 million surplus. How close have we been in the past?
Well, those are two different questions, because we had a $1 billion problem because we had taxes rolling off the books that were not coming back anymore. And so if we didn't have that revenue, we would have had a big hole in what we had been spending. And in the answer to your question about how close do you get it is what I'm talking about. You never hit it right on the button. There have been years where the states had deficits, and there have been years where the states had surpluses. The past 2 years, we've had surpluses. The years before that, in the first couple of years of this administration, we had deficits because we were not using one-time money anymore to balance the budget, and because the estimate wasn't met.
Teacher pay is one thing the governor has said is going to be a priority for him this year, talking about a $1,000 pay raise for teachers. Is that going to be enough to satisfy teachers? As Robert always says, that amounts to $20 a week.
Well, I think it will be. I think anything that can be done, I think, would be beneficial, but there'll be arguments about $1,000 is not enough. But that's what the proposal is going to be, and that's what the governor believes is the appropriate amount to shoot for, and it's the amount that we think we can afford based upon the other needs of the state. This is one of the big questions about what the revenue estimate is going to be, because we're counting on the revenue estimate to be able to afford a raise of that magnitude without having to make dramatic cuts elsewhere. We don't have that revenue estimate yet. That's the big problem, as you've been reading about and hearing about. We don't have a revenue estimate for next year yet. We were supposed to have it, obviously, last year, and we haven't gotten one yet. But
what's the holdup?
That's going to be the determinant.
What's the
holdup? The Speaker
holdup?
of the House has not agreed to accept the recommendation of the two state economists that we pay to give us this recommendation, and the decision of the REC has to be unanimous. So three of us have voted 3 times to pick an estimate for the state. The Speaker has refused to do so. We'll meet again in early April, and at that point, my guess is the Speaker is probably going to agree that we have to have a revenue estimate before the budget can move out of the legislature. The legislature will be starting right about the time that REC will be meeting again.
Mr. J, we've talked to local teachers union people up here, and they say, yeah, $20 is a nice place to start. And in fact, bluntly speaking, they've been rather dismissive of that $1,000 a year offer, or that $1,000 a year raise. The governor's phone has to have been ringing about that. What kind of blowback, what kind of feedback has he gotten sort of off the record from teachers and teachers unions across the state?
Well, I can't tell you that, what kind of blowback he's gotten off the record or on the record, to tell you the truth. But my sense is that the teachers are going to be happy to be getting a raise. And I think most of them will recognize that the raise is going to have to be a reasonable amount given the economic status of the state and given where our revenue estimate is going to be. So I think they're going to be happy with whatever they can get. And actually, the legislature, you haven't heard a lot of blowback from the legislature over whether we should give a raise. There's going to be some legitimate debate over how much it should be, who should get it, should there be limitations on who gets it based upon certifications and other things, and that's what the legislative debate will be about. But I haven't heard any legislators say I'm not in favor of giving teachers a raise.